Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I'm your host of Football Grump, and with me today is a very special guest. He is the host of the Just the Giants Fan podcast. He is the one and only Victor Perez. Victor, welcome to Just Giants.
Thank you. I swear, when I came up with the name of my podcast, I spent like 2 days trying to think of something unique, and every time I fucking Googled it, somebody else already had it. Finally landed, you know what? I'm just a Giants fan. That's what I'm going to call myself. Googled it. Nothing came up. By the time I posted my second episode, Googled myself to see if it came up. Your podcast came up. I was like, you know what? I give up. I'm not doing this. I ain't changing it. So I wasn't trying to take anything from you guys. It's just Google sucks. All right?
No, it's...
I'm glad to be here. You guys do a great podcast. We have a lot of shows. Fans in general, like Giants fans, have a lot of shows that seem to resemble the voice of the people. But you guys are very much in line with that. You know, I don't turn you on to go to sleep. We'll put it that way.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, you know, what's funny is you're like probably one of my first followers on Twitter, I think, that really truly like interacted a whole lot with me, and we thought it was kind of funny that our podcast names are similar. How long were we around when you had ended up making it? Because I feel like it was right around when we started.
I have no idea, right? Like I clicked and I saw, oh crap, there's a few episodes up. I look like I just stole this podcast name. But, you know, I was just like, I'm not even going to stress about it. My podcast is very reflective of my attitude, right? Is like, I'm just having fun with this. I'm going to talk about what I want to. I'm going to form the opinions that I do. I don't want to parrot what anybody else does. I don't want to just be one of those, you know, like you see like the sites where it's like, oh, they just basically copy and pasted someone else's article, cited them, but their content is completely somebody else's. So like my content's a lot like that. And it's also like that in that it kind of goes up whenever I get a chance or feel like recording. You know, if it's a week where it's like, man, that loss sucked, I'm just going to complain like everybody else is. I'm not putting up an episode. So I guess to go back to your question, I have no fucking idea.
Well, I highly recommend listening to Just a Giants Fan podcast. The episodes feel to me like just the right amount of like level-headedness and emotion. Like you really do split between the two, and like even when you're mad, it's a very relaxed mad. It gives off this like disappointed dad kind of feel about the team, which is kind of funny, but also like hurts so much. Like I feel that one, but it's informative, it's intelligent, you're very patient, and you account for a lot of nuance. You know, I think that like you and I actually share a lot of similar opinions. I think, you know, just going through, and not everything, but I mean, who does? But, you know, I think you're a very smart guy, and that's why I brought you on here. And that's to make me look smart. That's what I'm looking for here.
I appreciate that.
No problem at all. So what we're doing here, we've all bitched and moaned about how the 2021 season clearly hasn't gone the way anyone wanted or kind of expected. We've done plenty of that. So since the prospect of playoffs this year is pretty slim, not out of the realm of possibility, but slim, we can take this time off here, this bye week, to start to look at how the Giants can try to continue to rebuild this franchise into a contender. What we've been looking at for like the last, what has it been, a decade? So, you know, this is going to be kind of a two-part episode here. You know, Victor's going to work with me here on the financial issues that are facing the Giants next year. And so the cap ceiling for 2022 agreed upon between the NFLPA and the NFL is $208.2 million. That's we agree on that, right? Because one of the things we talked about right before we did this is that everybody's numbers when they do cap stuff like this, especially projected a year in the future, everyone's numbers are going to be a little bit different, right? But the ceiling's the same.
Yeah, and it's fucked up, right, in a way, because I think the NFLPA screwed their players by agreeing to a $208 million cap. Because now that people are back in stadiums, now that these TV deals have kicked in, and, you know, the profits are going to start exploding. But they negotiated that cap. I think it could be more. Like, if they hadn't done it, I'd be very surprised to see the cap be under 208. But honestly, I think it probably will end up being more if there wasn't an agreed upon cap. But yeah, 208 is what everybody assumes. That should be right, but that's the most. So any figures we talk about here, that's going to be based on that. And if it comes, for whatever reason, comes out lower, we're probably in a worse situation, a much worse situation.
Yeah. So that is just another instance of the NFLPA not doing a very good job at their own job. Just another one of those instances. So we agree then that it's $208.2 million is what we're going to be basing it around. And what that means is that the Giants are projected to have $10 million over that cap as we speak right now today. And that's actually a day after Graham Gano moved his cap stuff around for this year's stuff, which I didn't even notice until I started doing this exercise. So the Giants are projected to be $10 million over the cap, about 10.5 actually. But they will have 42 players. They currently have 42 players signed to that 2022 roster. Where do you want to start when you look at this roster as a whole? Because you kind of want to look at strength of this team?
Yeah, so really, you got to look at where we're good and where we're not good, right? So on paper, anyway, assuming everybody's healthy, I should like about 85% of this team. I mean, it's not really a debate that we need starters on the O-line. The debate is really like, all right, well, how many? And even then, that's kind of not a strong debate. I think it's at least two positions. I would say, at best, it's two positions. And that really depends on, whether you think Hernandez and Pert can function as starters on the right side at some point, and how much they grow this year. It depends on Nick Gates if he's able to come back from that horrific leg injury and come back and start and pick things right back up. If it were talking about this year right now, I mean, the ideal line, right, is Thomas, Gates, Price, Hernandez, and Pert, just based on what we've seen and what they should have been this year. So you figure at least two of those you got to be able to flip, and specifically on the right side, and improve. I don't want to do that through free agency. You're going to end up overpaying. Yeah, I mean, look at Nate Solder. That's the most recent example for us. You can also talk about Jeff Schwartz years ago. You can talk about it happens every single time. You always overpay. They almost never meet the contract. When you're picking somebody else up off free agency. I also think that Austin Johnson, not for nothing, doesn't do it for me. Even though he's been good, better lately. At least as long as Danny Shelton isn't next to him. He doesn't quite do it for me. Although I'm biased because I missed Linval Joseph when he left, and I missed Dalvin Tomlinson now that he's gone. I'm one of those. We can always use another bona fide pass rusher. I mean, Ojulari's been, as advertised. He just needs to show that he can keep it up the rest of the year. Roche's been a pleasant surprise lately. But he's another one where it's like, all right, well, you've shown me that you can have an impact in a game. You just got to keep that up. Right. And if not, then that's one more pass rusher we got to find, right? I'm higher than most on O'Shane Ximenez, whatever, write him off. He don't count no more. He's a backup rotational guy. He's backup. Lorenzo Carter, I'm higher on him than most.
So am I.
I'll tell you guys right now. And it's because I feel like when people rag on him, it's because they want him to be one of those pure pass rushes. And that's not really him. He's got to be looked at as the Sam linebacker that the Giants need him to be. And in that role, I think he's done pretty well. Like to me, he profiles somewhere between Devon Kennard and Romeo Okwara through their first 4 years. And we know what happened with those guys when they left the team. They got, oh shit, there was the bump we were looking for, right?
Right.
So I'm okay with I would be okay with Lorenzo Carter and Azeez Ojulari, assuming that they don't take a dip. as starters. Linebacker, the rest of the linebackers, I mean, Tate Crowder's good as a second inside linebacker. Martinez, if he's healthy, I think we'd be set at inside linebacker, just permanent, just good. I mean, we saw how well it was working with those two there, and Tate Crowder, he does have his dips. He's getting better. He's getting more awareness, and I think this past week he kind of showed a bit more that he's ready to step in. When he step in at that inside linebacker captain of the defense role. He has had some dips this year though, so he's still growing. But as far as two starters, I'm good there. Where we have been fucked is depth at pretty much every position except safety. And it's aside from the O-line starters, it's the second someone gets injured, shit, there goes the fucking season. And we can't have that. And that's where the Giants need to build. That's where they need to start looking for, okay, if this guy goes down with injury or his contract expires, is somebody on this roster further down ready to step up? We don't have many of those. We're betting on the guys we have just got here, where it's like, maybe he can, but they just fucking got here. You know what I mean? So we got to find, through the draft, the free agency, we got to find guys who are young enough to sign and try to keep around for a while, but we don't have the room really, and we'll get into that. We don't have the room next year to be signing legit starter day one. But yeah, I no more of these guys that are special teamers that fit into this very narrow role on defense, like guys who can step up at any point and do what you need them to do to keep this defense running as is. That's what I think.
Yeah, I again think we're pretty much in line with a lot of things. Let's start with this. Just kind of run down the way that you started. Well, like you said, our weakest spot, everyone agrees, right, has got to be the offensive line. So when we look at who is signed for 2022 on the interior of the offensive line, you're looking at only three guys. It's Shane Lemieux, who we saw for I think one series before he tried to play through a knee injury or something like that. That didn't work. And really last year, 2022, he was he was okay. I was excited to see how he had grown because he was just okay at best overall. He was kind of a plus run blocker, but pitiful in pass blocking. I didn't really see much improvement throughout the year. So I was looking forward to him this year. So now I have no idea what to expect out of him. But he's signed through 2022. Ben Bredesen also, he kind of hurt his hand, and now he hasn't even reclaimed his spot from Matt Skura. And Nick Gates is signed through 2022, but I have to see that he can push guys and put a lot of weight on that leg. I want nothing more than Nick Gates to come back and be the badass that I know he is. I don't know that he can do that, at least in 2022. I don't know that he can do that. So that leaves us with a grand total of three guys signed to the interior offensive line, all of which are question marks.
Yeah, and for me, what I would do, honestly, is I would actually extend Hernandez.
Okay.
I think
I'm with you there, by the way.
He cannot be getting money in the top, 15 for veteran guards, or top 20 is the other thing people mix up when they look at it. When they look at annual salaries and stuff like that, they don't filter out who's on a rookie deal. But I wouldn't put him within the top 15 of veteran guards. I also think his agent would be foolish. I would give him 3 to 4 years, $5.5 million a year, and give him the ability to get out of the contract. He can void it 2 years in if he takes a jump and he wants to try and test elsewhere. But you got to try and fill those holes with guys who are decent right now until you can draft a legit line, right? Because like I said earlier, you don't want to sign a legit line over because they're never going to meet their contract. So you want to try and at least keep some continuity there. So guys like Will Hernandez, who has an expiring contract, Billy Price, I would re-sign him to as close to peanuts as you can get. because I don't think they're going to either one of them is going to get like a lucrative contract elsewhere, not after this year. You know what I mean? So
True.
you try and at least stem the bleeding there with however you can do it.
You know, I'm with you, because what you have to understand is that Will Hernandez is going to command the most money out of Billy Price, Matt Skura, and Will Hernandez, right? And I think I agree with you. $5 million a year, that's an increase for him. This year he's making $3 million. He counts for $3 million against the cap anyway. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about when we say that, right? Like how much you're going to give them. Really, we're talking about the cap hit. So you know that's something for him. That's an increase for him. I don't know that he's going to command a whole lot in the market more than that. And if he does, then you can let him walk. But we're trying to upgrade these guys, and we're talking about the draft. And obviously, we're not talking about that right now on this episode. But just in general, through Twitter, on the day-to-day, we talk about the draft and all the guys we're excited about coming out of college or whatever. We still need depth. The 3 guys that we have signed are all big-time injury concerns or just aren't very good. Like Ben Bredesen may not be even good enough to be depth. So that means you might need to sign a guy like Billy Price to be your backup center. Or he can just be your center while the guy you drafted gets a little acclimated to the NFL, so he's not thrust into a terrible position right off the bat. And you know what I mean? So, like, I would actually say all 3 of those guys that are currently starting for us, Will Hernandez, Billy Price, and Matt Skura, all of those guys, I would consider giving. Well, you said extend Will Hernandez. Would you wait for his contract to expire and then sign him then to a totally new deal?
No, I wouldn't. I would try to extend him because his contract expires after this year, right?
Correct.
So I would try to extend him before the end of the year. Yeah. And like that $5 to $5.5 million a year. I use that as a number for the people at home. That's comparable to Laken Tomlinson over on the 49ers. That's the deal he got back in 2018. So that kind of increase now would probably be like $7 million, but Will Hernandez is not worth $7 million. So I would keep it to that. Laken Tomlinson has outplayed that contract. That is a either journeyman on your O-line or, a reliable backup, which I think Will Hernandez fits into. You have to throw him in a game as a backup. You're not going to be too worried. You know what you get. So Niners got a steal. For Will Hernandez, that's about right for his. I also wouldn't guarantee much, but that would be about right for his talent.
I agree too. Will Hernandez would be my priority because I think it's really difficult to replace really what you're looking at here is a possible need at left guard, center, right guard, and right tackle. Mm-hmm. I mean, that just is not possible to do with the cap implications that they're up against and the draft. I mean, you really don't know what you're going to get out of Nick Gates or Shane Lemieux if they're going to be able to play at all. And as we start to shift now to the outside guys with Matt Parrott, like, is he going to play right tackle and be effective? And, hopefully when we're done with this bye week, that question will be answered. Like, hopefully we'll know at the end of 2021, we come back from this bye week, we play Tampa Bay with Andrew Thomas on one side, Matt Parrott on the right side, and we get to see a product that is something that we can build off of. But even that is like pie in the sky that's going to be your starter at right tackle. So you absolutely need to bring in somebody. Somebody's got to come back. It can't be all drafted rookies playing 4 spots on the offensive line. And I'm with you. I think Will Hernandez is that guy. But as we go to the tackle spot, we only have Andrew Thomas and Matt Parrott signed through 2022 because we voided the 2022 Nate Solder year. And even if we didn't, there's no way he's coming back anyway. So we've only got 2 tackles signed to 2022.
Yeah, and that's a problem, but you also can't, again, you can't go looking for guys who are really good on the free agent market. We don't got the room, and you're gonna way overpay for them. So you kind of have to bargain bin as far as getting to a top 51. You got to bargain bin hunt on that front, and you got to try and build through the draft. It sucks. Yeah. We'll know what the coaching staff, how confident they are in Matt Pert, or it's Parrott, right?
I actually don't know. I've said Parrott all along, and I don't know if it's right or not. And I'm just sticking to my guns, man.
Yeah, we'll know how the coaching staff feels as soon as Andrew Thomas is well enough to play again. If Nate Solder's still in there, it don't look good, which means we'll probably have to spend a first-round pick on a tackle. But if he's starting, if he bookends with Thomas, then I'm a little more comfortable going, all right, well, let's see what warm bodies we can try and get to develop, hopefully. But as far as the offensive line is concerned, you can't do that through free agency. You got to do it through the draft. I really wouldn't be mad if they took every pick next year and spent it on linemen and maybe a couple on late ones on edge rushes. I wouldn't mind some insane draft like that. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, and especially next year, too. There seems to be a lot of... I mean, it's very early in the process. A lot can happen. Guys can get hurt. They can start to slump. They can do stupid things off the field. So I don't want to speak too soon. But it seems like there's a lot of quality offensive linemen coming out in next year's draft. Or at least are eligible for it. The tackle spot, without a doubt, needs to be... If what we see with Matt Parrott is really encouraging, and whatever, forget what fans think. If the coaches see something really encouraging, that is a huge relief, because you're pretty much looking, if you want to get a tackle that's going to be an upgrade over Matt Parrott, it's going to have to happen in the first 2 rounds for sure. So that's a huge investment. If you don't have to worry about that, I mean, the flexibility in what you can do is totally different now. I mean, you can really address the interior of the offensive line, which, by the way, I've been screaming about getting the interior of this line better since 2013, 2012, because to me, if you have a quarterback that can step up in the pocket, you're better off, but whatever. The point is that it's a huge relief if Matt Parrott can do that, and we can see that, because then you only really have to worry about getting a depth guy, which may not be very expensive in the free agent market, or can be a developmental guy in the draft, much like Matt Parrott was when he was drafted. There was no reason, we thought, to shove him along to play tackle at that time. But if he can't, then the major investment has to happen. It's got to be in that first two rounds. Really, I can't imagine a 3rd round pick being a starter right off the bat at tackle.
Yeah, you're also going to have, and keep in mind, people at home, amongst all this, the Giants are going to end up signing people to futures contracts. They might extend guys, on the back end a year, something like that, where they, some of the guys on the practice squad, some of the back end guys that we have right now, like an Isaiah Wilson, I would be legitimately surprised if we didn't sign him to a futures deal so that we have him for next year for not much.
Yeah, that's another factor we didn't talk about too.
But that's betting on, that's betting on the long shot. We're gonna kind of ignore, at least me anyway. I'm gonna try to ignore those guys because you're betting on development, and that hasn't worked for the Giants in about 5-6 years. So,
yeah,
I
other
don't
than
think
Nick Gates,
Nick
Gates is probably the only developmental good story we've had in a while, right?
Yeah, and he's a fucking unicorn. He's an angry unicorn, but he's still a unicorn.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Daniel Jones. I don't want to go too much into this because I think you and I are in agreement that quarterback is probably not going to be in the market for this team. Starting quarterback, right? We agree. Okay. So then what we have to talk about, though, is his 5th-year option, because that needs to be decided as soon as the season ends this year and before sometime in May. They have to make that. They have to pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, before the start. I think they have until before the start of next year to make that decision.
The official league year, and it starts somewhere around May-ish, right after the draft or something like that.
Yeah, so the new GM, because, we're not going to pretend like Dave Gettleman is going to avoid death again, right? He's gone after this year. So the new GM is going to have to evaluate whether or not DJ's worth putting a 5th-year tag on. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. Even if you don't like the kid, you do that anyway because it's still a cheap contract for a quarterback. And even if you go and you draft somebody next year or the year after, that 5th year is bait for somebody else to trade for. You know what I mean? It'll end up being a Josh Rosen situation, right? Let's say that we use our 2 picks to trade up and take our guy, it becomes a Josh Rosen situation where you're not going to get a first-round pick for him, but it's incentive for another team to trade for him because then they got him for 2 years. At the same time, on the other hand, though, you do think DJ is the guy. You do that then so you have another year to be able, with him on a rookie contract, to then work out a long-term deal. So I think it's a no-brainer. Really, you're looking at a backup quarterback, and then you got to pray that you get somebody cheap like Mike Lennon.
Yeah.
He was a steal this year.
Yeah. Well, I think certain people were steals this year just because of the insanely low cap. I don't think that was, intentional or anything like that. Yeah, probably
not. It's not going to happen again.
But Daniel Jones, we're not really gonna have to worry about him at all for the 2022 season. He's an $8 million cap hit. That's nothing. So what we'd only really have to worry about is if he starts, if this offense opens up in the second half of this year and he starts throwing for 400-yard games all the time, we might have to start thinking about extending him before really exercising that 5th-year option. But that's not really something we need to worry about today. But just so people realize, with the 5th-year option, what we're probably looking at for him is about a $20 million cap hit for 2023.
Even if you, let's say, right, like he goes off, he looks like the next coming of Rogers Christ, right? And he just has an amazing back end of this year. You can still sign him to the 5th-year option because most agents, and then renegotiate it later, because most agents any agent worth his salt is going to use the 5th-year option, or what it should be, as the floor for what the money in that 5th year should be, and then you just go back and you renegotiate it. And in 2023 anyway, we'll have the room to absorb hopefully a big quarterback cap hit anyway. So if they insist on more money up front, we got the availability to do that. But either way, I think it's just a no-brainer. Like, you almost have to at this point sign him, exercise that 5th-year option.
Yeah, I think I'm totally with you. Running back room, I don't really have any issues, right? Barkley is signed for $7 million for next year. Beyond that, Devontae Booker is there. He's a $3 million cap hit. Which also, I mean, he could be a cut right there to say if we needed like a quick $2 million or something like that, and we felt that we had, some baller rookie that we've managed to get in the 5th round or whatever. I don't know. That's $2 million right there, $1 million dead cap hit for him. And then Gary Brightwell, we'll see if he ever breaks into the offense at all, this year. But he's signed all the way through 2024. If this is the room next year, it's what we're already dealing with pretty much. I'm fine, I guess.
Yeah, me too. It's, anybody that's behind Saquon is going to be breaking case of emergency, right? And although it's felt like we've needed to break that glass every year for the past couple of years.
Yeah. It's more like retape in case of emergency.
Yeah, right. But yeah, you don't need to worry about spending money behind Saquon. You got to worry about spending money on Saquon.
Yeah.
In the future.
Yeah, and that's going to be like a 2023 thing. That's a whole new GM's decision, and I don't know that he's going to want to do that. But I'm a big proponent of every single year, just grab a couple rookie running backs. Just two undrafted guys, maybe a 7th round guy. If you see somebody falling that doesn't belong falling, just grab them. Just grab running backs every year. I mean, especially if they're undrafted guys, because they just, I don't know. It's so dependent on the offense and the offensive line that you can just not spend there and get something. Whereas you're not really going to do that very often with, I mean, obviously quarterback, but, most people on the offensive line, tight ends, maybe you get like a good blocking tight end like that. You're not going to get a whole lot of wide receivers like that. Running back is probably the most productive spot that you're going to get something like that.
Yeah, and it's the most bang for your, on paper, it's the most bang for your buck. How it actually works out, is really anybody's guess any given year. But on any given year, there's usually, more than a few guys that you can sign to close to the minimum as a break in case of emergency back anyway. So I'm not really concerned about that kind of spending, or that we're going to need to spend an obscene amount of money, at that position. You should be able to find somebody for not much on the market in like second or third wave of free agency.
Yeah. Well, we'll assume that whatever the new GM is won't be signing Devontae Booker's out there on the first day of free agency, and we'll just kind of see what shakes loose down the line, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, you got guys like Boston Scott, Kalen Ballage. I can't pronounce his name.
It's Kalen Ballage, yeah.
Ballage, yeah. John Kelly, all those guys are not making much right now that should be free agents next year.
And for what it's worth, I was really high on both John Kelly and Kalen Ballage coming out of college. So I guess I whiffed on that. But, what do I know?
We're just guys off the street, right?
Yeah, pretty much. The tight end room, Kyle Rudolph is theoretically signed. He's got a $7 million cap hit, but he's only going to be 2.25 dead hit. I have to imagine Kyle Rudolph is gone, right?
Yeah. If it were me, I'd cut him. After the season, that's one place that does concern me a bit. It takes, if you're going for a rookie, if they're not, if they're not Kyle Pitts, they take about 3 years to develop. So, and with our tight end room, Kyle Rudolph is too much of a cap hit given our situation next year, so he's got to go. Evan Ingram, if we extended him, there'd be riots in the streets, So he's probably not here next year, although I'm probably one of the few people that thinks we should extend him, but he won't sign with us. Like I don't think he signs with us, even if we try to.
No,
we can't
I don't
afford
think so
him.
either. Yeah.
So you got Cayden Smith, who is really our only proven can play tight end next year. Then you got guys like Ryzen John. Ryzen John on paper should end up something like what Donald Parham Jr. is for the Chargers right now, where it's like he's tall. When we get into the red zone, he's got that ability to be able to, be a touchdown threat. He's if he could block, he would be what we wanted out of Kyle Rudolph so far this year. But he's one of those guys who we haven't gotten an opportunity to see what he can do. So that's another betting on development. So really, outside of Cayden Smith, you don't have anybody really in this tight end room who's, in my opinion, who is going to be proven. So it's going to be another one of those bargain bin hunting, if you're lucky, this offseason.
Well, I mean, there's definitely no argument with that. Cayden Smith and Ryzen John combined, though. And by the way, I liked the little bit I was able to see from Ryzen John. I think in addition to being tall, he's really fast for the position. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's a converted wide receiver or not, but he's like absurdly fast. He is? Okay. Yeah, I view him as what Evan Ingram is. Obviously not the same talent level, but same kind of skill set. Tall, fast, stretches the field kind of thing, except they come in a completely different price range. Between Smith and John, we're only spending not even $2 million there. So if we're saving over $5 million with Kyle Rudolph, it's about 5 3/4. I feel like we could sign a good starting tight end for about 5 3/4. I'm not talking the George Kittles of the world or anything like that, but
yeah, but the problem comes back to, do we have the money for that next year? And the assumption, in case it hasn't been clear to the people at home, I don't think my back of the napkin math, we ain't got shit next year in terms of being able to spend anybody. We're going to be working our way back to just be able to afford to get into the season. So Ryzen John, it would be great if we could, if he could develop into something and show us next year that, hey, I can have a starting role in this. But I think they're probably going to be going for like role players. Like, this is your blocking tight end. The Cayden Smith is your utility guy that can do pretty much everything you ask him for. Even though he's nowhere near George Kittle, he can do whatever you ask him for. Ryzen John is going to be that guy where it's like, all right, passing down, we want to screw with our personnel packages. and we want to put an extra tight end on the field, but really he's a receiver. So, in a sunny day, that's how it would work out. And then you got to fill in guys to just figure out the rest of it. You got to get bodies in there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
I disagree in that I don't think I don't think we're going to have the money to be able to sign like a legit starting guy.
Well,
it's going to be some of the guys I think we should re-sign or extend, before the end of the year. I don't know how we're going to come up with that money. You gotta. That's for the front office to figure out how they're, the contract is going to accrue, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But my math has us at like $500,000 going into next year. Not assuming some moves get made, but I have us at like we start with like $500,000.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is we have to look at the hope that we're running a different offensive system where we don't need 3 tight ends to be active on Sundays because we need to run jumbo sets. You know what I mean? Like, that's another thing to consider. Like, are we going to be rolling out there with essentially 10 offensive linemen, and none of these guys can really catch exceptionally well? Between Kyle Rudolph, Cayden Smith, and even Evan Ingram, for that matter, doesn't necessarily catch, even if he is a more receiving tight end or whatever. I have to assume that we're going to go into the year with a different offense. I have to do this for my own sanity. I mean, that we're going to go into it with a different offensive mindset where, tight ends can just be tight ends, and we don't need to, have so many guys active just to open the playbook because we can't block on the offensive line. We need to have at all times this tight end ready to just go in there, like a Levine Toilolo, to just go in there and block. Like a guy like Rice and John, I don't want to see shit out of next year. I don't expect anything out of him next year. But it would be cool if we had him around next year to learn and develop and get that talent, to grow what he's already got around him. And then you just kind of roll with Cayden Smith and hopefully like just somebody who can somebody on par with Cayden Smith. If we had 2 Cayden Smiths, we wouldn't be a very good tight end room, but we wouldn't. How much worse would we be than now? I mean, now as in Kyle Rudolph, Cayden Smith, and Rice and John, since we both know Ingram won't be back.
Yeah, it would be nice, and as much as on Twitter anyway, like I've been very honest and public about my disdain for our personnel department. Yeah. The next guard should be able to be able to bring somebody in. We should be able to figure something out. I don't expect to look at the roster next year, despite our money troubles for 2022, and go, oh well, we might as well not have a tight end. Mm-hmm. So I just don't expect that we're going to be able to, or that we're going to sign, a $5 million a year tight end. Even that cheap. I don't think we're going to be able to do it.
Well, yeah, because we need to get $10 million off the books just to get under the cap, and then you need the money just to sign your draft picks, which 2 first-round draft picks, you're looking at a heftier price than normal. Just is what it is. So then on top of that, addressing any holes outside of the draft is going to be maybe like 1 legit starter somewhere. Mm-hmm. At best, maybe deal. Will Hernandez. Yeah. Looking at wide receivers, I have no concerns here really, other than are we going to throw to these guys or not. Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, Kadarius Toney, and Sterling Shepard are all signed through 2022. Websites like SpotTrack list 2022 as like a potential out for Sterling Shepard, but with $8 million dead versus a $12 million cap hit, saving $4 million versus what Sterling Shepard can bring to the table, I think is honestly debatable. When you look at that room, you have 3 guys put kind of ahead of him. I don't know where you'd fit Darius Slayton with that in the depth chart. There's kind of different guys in terms of what they do. I don't know that you're gonna have the solid depth at the slot position if you get rid of Sterling Shepard. I mean, what happens if Kadarius Toney gets hurt and is out for 4 games? Like, who's that next guy up? Colin Johnson, Derek Dillon are the only other guys signed through 2022. I expect the wide receiver room will probably be addressed in the draft a little bit, maybe a little further down, but I don't know. What do you think about that? Is there any savings there for you?
I mean, there's I wouldn't cut Shep. I think his talent, because like whenever you cut a guy, right, you got to be able to, with that savings, ideally you want to be able to replace
or upgrade
what he does, or upgrade, and then bring somebody else. Mm-hmm. That's the general rule of thumb whenever you cut somebody is, can I replace him, upgrade, or can I replace and add? So it's with Shep, completely agree. You cut him for what the savings is, you're not going to be able to replicate that. You're not even going to have a lateral move with Shep, at least not next year. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he's a target to be cut, and I would be really nervous about the depth in our wide receiver room if we did do that. I think you just kind of leave it alone for what we have and bring in somebody to develop on the back end.
I totally agree. And for me, the 2023 year for Sterling Shepard that's my out year for him. I mean, he counts for 13.5 against the cap, but there's only $4 million dead if he's cut. If there's a time to cut Sterling Shepard, for me, it's 2023. I love Sterling Shepard. I don't want him gone at all, but it just is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. Flipping to the defensive side, do you want to start with the D-backs?
Yeah, the defensive backs, I mean, as far as next year, we're okay. I think that's another one where you just kind of leave it alone. You want to bring in, as far as starters are concerned, you want to try and bring back Jabril Peppers if you can. I mean, luckily for the Giants, he got injured. That sounds fucked up to say, right? But luckily for the Giants, he got injured, so I don't think he's going to be getting any like Jamal Adams deals, coming off of this year. People are going to say, hey, here's a 1-year deal. We might pay you a decent amount for that. But I'm hoping that Jabril Peppers, instead of taking that deal with a new team, new system, that kind of thing, he tries to do that again and have his bounce back year with the Giants. Other than him, I don't think you touch the secondary, anything like that at all. I don't think you cut anybody, because God bless you if you're trying to replicate the production, cut and then replicate the production of any of our corners. Same thing with the safeties. I don't think there's really anybody that you can cut. And if you bring back Jabril Peppers, you've got the three musketeers back there still, and Ryan, Pep, and McKinney. So I would try to bring him back and not screw around with that at all. In the future, you gotta get going on finding some new young outside corners, because the second Jackson and Bradbury's contracts are up, I'd be surprised if they get signed to even a 2-year extension. I really would. You got to find some guys that got to replicate and be able to come up and replace them. As far as next year, though, don't touch it. Don't fuck around.
That's interesting, because the main target here, and I mean his name would probably come up in red as maybe the first or second guy when you're looking to save money, is James Bradbury, because he has manipulated his contract so much to help the Giants in cap relief right now that he is now looking at a $22 million cap hit next year, but only $9 million dead if he's hit. But I mean, this team just simply can't afford to lose an outside corner right now. Adoree Jackson and Rodarius Williams are really the only outside corners, and everybody pitched a fit, or not everybody, but a large group of Giants fans pitched a fit when Adoree Jackson was signed because of his injury history. And Rodarius Williams, not for nothing, is a 6th-round pick that just had an ACL injury. So that's not somebody I really want starting in 2022. So I'm with you with leave it alone, but I do think that there's something. I mean, do you see a fall off in Bradbury's play that you wouldn't necessarily extend him and kind of lower the cap hit for next year?
Not really. Honestly, I think Bradbury is the same guy. He's playing the same way that he did last year. It's the same troubles with this defense that we saw last year. So there hasn't been a dip in his play. The difference between this year and last year is last year he had Isaac Yiadom across from him. Right. Now he's got Adoree Jackson, who's a fucking lightning bolt, and has played to the point, in my opinion, that you can make an argument about which one of those two is CB1.
True.
It's CB1 and 1A and 1B. So because he's playing at that level, he would be a CB1 on most other teams. given what their current corners are. So you cut him. You want to try to replace him with the CB1, and you're going to overpay. You're not going to be able to buy one with that savings, or you got to spend like your first pick on it and hope that guy comes in and is a day one CB1 starter, which doesn't happen. It doesn't. No,
it really doesn't. Yeah, you're right. But by the way, this is why when guys like, I think it was Dan Duggan and Art Stapleton were both saying, Patrick Surtain is absolutely on the table for a first-round draft pick this year, and people backlash. I mean, this is why. It's so that you bring Patrick Surtain in this year, and you could cut James Bradberry theoretically next year. You at least have that flexibility to save, whatever, $11 million, $12 million, and you have Patrick Surtain fill in that spot. That was a completely legitimate strategy. They didn't end up pulling that trigger, obviously, but that's why that's on the table. A lot of people were like, why would you do that considering what we have? That's why, is you're thinking beyond the year that you're drafting somebody. For me, I'm looking to see if I can extend James Bradberry and lower next year's cap. I don't really know how long. I wouldn't say any more than beyond 2024. Kind of like what we did with Logan Ryan, was like a 3-year the first year was restructured and then like 2 years added on, right?
I think his 2022 contract is the last year that he signed through. 2023 is a void year, just as part of that restructure. I would like to extend him, but 30, it tends to be the cliff for a lot of players in general, never mind corners. And Bradberry isn't fast as is. What was it? Chris Carter said something when he was still on TV. Oh, you don't get weaker in the NFL. The longer you're in the NFL, you get stronger. You do get slower, though. And Bradberry isn't quick in the first place. He's good enough for an outside corner, but he's not quick. So 30, to me, that's about when he should fall off. I would actually probably let his contract expire and see if I can get him on the cheap in free agency. If you can extend him a year or two, help yourself out up front, fine. But he's already got a $1.3 million restructure bonus in 2023. It's, I have a hard time signing him because of his age, or extending him because of his age. Who knows, though? Maybe he'll show next year that he's worth an extension.
That's fair, yeah. But either way, I think corner has to be addressed in the draft because you have to start looking at beyond next year when you're drafting next year. I mean, like, it was cool that they went out and got Rodarius Williams because he was impressing, kind of. Certainly did more than I expected right off the bat. Earned a lot more playing time than I thought right off the bat, but he's hurt now, and I'm not really counting on him to continue that development coming off a torn ACL right away. So to me, corner becomes a draft position of need for me, and it's something that I don't really hear anybody else talking about. Not that I think I'm smart, I just think that is overshadowed by what we're probably going to talk about next, is edge rushers, which people are screaming about, right? I mean, when you look at the 2022 edge room, could it possibly look worse than 2021's?
Well, corners and edges are those positions that require a year of development time, and if you don't constantly think ahead, it becomes an issue very, very quickly. Like for the Giants.
Yep.
JPP left, and it became a huge issue for the Giants very quickly, and it's never quite gone away. If Azeez Ojulari, you got to give him another year to continue to develop, but so far he looks like we should be good as far as a will linebacker. I think Lorenzo Carter, if you extend him or re-sign him, you've got your Sam linebacker as far as Sam functions set. It's going to be the backup guys, and I know a lot of people are going to look at, Marcus Golden got signed on the cheap. Hassan Reddick got signed on the cheap, but those guys are very narrow as an excuse as to why you shouldn't re-sign Lorenzo Carter. Those guys are strictly pass rushers. Those guys are strictly, all they do is see ball, get ball. So those are the kinds of guys that we want to look at, and it's fine to go ahead and try and sign one of those guys, but I think that needs to be done in conjunction with like re-signing Lorenzo Carter or extending him, or get one of those guys in the draft. But then, we already got to look at O-line. We already got to look at corner for the future. How many early draft picks are you going to spend where? And edge rusher isn't for me, early draft capital spot, but it's something that definitely does need to be addressed, either with a Marcus Golden contract to a Marcus Golden type in free agency, or you spend a middle round pick. I know some people are schwitzing at home about that because how many third and fourth round picks have we spent on guys that are like, we hope they develop, and I'm basically saying we need to do that again. But I don't see that as our most pressing issue where you got to throw money at it, and I don't see it as long as you re-sign Lorenzo Carter, I don't see that as like a position where you got to sign a starter.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, and and I think some of those see-ball, get-ball guys, there's like Ellerson Smith to me is a see-ball, get-ball guy, and I was really annoyed that not annoyed like it's his fault, but it's frustrating that he got hurt because he didn't play in 2020 in college, and he just is that guy. I mean, he's like a straight up just like he's fast and long, so he's just gonna try and get to the quarterback. That's really what he does. I don't really expect him to drop into coverage a whole lot, though. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't rule anything out with Patrick Graham, but guys like that, I mean, I'm hoping that he develops. But you're kind of right. I mean, like, it would be great if there was a Chase Young on the other side of Azeez Ojulari. But, right now with the needs that this team has on the offensive line, I have to think that just sort of falls away. And we're speaking in generalities here. Like I say things like O-line and edge, like those are people. They're not people. So like obviously if the edge guy that's on the board is like a Class A 5-star edge rusher, and then the top O-line guy is like, he's good. Obviously go for the edge. Get the better player, but it's not looking like that's going to be what the Giants situation is when they go to pick in the first round. So
yeah, and and for guys like Ellerson Smith, it'd be nice. Another one where it's like, hey, it'd be nice. It'd be nice if Carter Coughlin developed into just this tiny white lightning off the edge. It would be nice. Raymond Johnson, becomes even a role player edge threat. I haven't seen that. So I can't say, I don't want to tell the people at home like, oh, well, we'll be okay when.
Oh, no. Yeah. No, don't count on anything Ellerson Smith. That's what I'm just saying. Like, I thought it was cool that they got a guy that wasn't like. They got a guy in the middle rounds in Ellerson Smith that was just that. This is his skill set. This is what he does well. Don't try and make more of him. Just make this part of him better and just let him do that. So as opposed to going out and getting a Marcus Golden out there or whatever, and you're spending this top dollar on a guy who can only do one thing. Not top dollar, but you know what I'm saying. Like you're spending more than the $1 million Ellerson Smith cap hit on a guy who does one thing, or you go out there and get a guy who only does that one thing and you just let him do that one thing. But it's a shame because we didn't get to see any of it through the first half of the year. He was just active. Actually, he played, I think, maybe 2 special team snaps. He was beyond just being active against the Raiders. I believe he did see some field. So who knows? Maybe I'm speaking too soon on what we'll see from him this year.
Well, you gotta stack that type of player anyway at edge, right? Even if he's a rotational guy, you can't just have one. And all he does is see ball, get ball. You can't have just one of those on the roster. You can't have just 2 of those on the roster. You're gonna have multiples of them. Yeah. So even though, like I said before, I'm gonna get fucking annoyed if we keep getting special teamers that all they do is this one narrow thing. But I think that's, at least in theory, right? That's one position where you could get away with that. If he plays special teams and all he does outside of that is power rush, fuck it. When the situation calls for it, go ahead and do it. And Patrick Graham, he'll probably set it up to where teams expect that when they see that kind of personnel in, and then throw some kind of curveball anyway. So I have no problem with, as far as edge, if we, again, re-sign Lorenzo Carter, don't pay him. like a top 15 edge rusher. You pay him like a Sam linebacker. But, as long as that happens, I'm comfortable with getting a few role players to strictly, rushes to supplement what we already have on the roster.
Yeah. I'm a little bit more concerned about the inside spot than edge spot because I'm right there with you. Right now I look at this defense and I see, they're held back a little bit by I think their biggest holdback right now isn't actually the edge room. I think it's the ineptitude of the offense. The offense can't score points, so they're always playing in a tight game or from behind. So the defense is kind of made more one-dimensional than they should be. And they have to take a lot fewer risks. So, to me, instead of making that defense better by adding a top-tier edge rusher, getting a badass offensive lineman to keep drives alive or I don't know, whatever. Just getting somebody to help the offense wherever it is they may play to get them to score points, I think helps the defense more and ultimately helps win more than getting a badass edge guy to make the defense better. That's just my opinion. However, the inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker kind of guys, this is concerning because I like you said, Blake Martinez and Tate Crowder next to each other. I'm super comfortable with that. I'm totally cool with that. But my big thing here is that Blake Martinez counts for a $14 million cap hit with only 5.5 dead, and he's coming off of a major injury. That, to me, is probably the number one crosshairs target for money saving for next year. Do you don't agree with that, though, right?
No. I think there's other... In a perfect world, you would cut a few other guys and then try and rework some deals or at least add void years. If I were a GM, I'd say, fuck it. Solder's gone. Rudolph's gone. Dixon's gone. I'll trade Booker or cut him. I'll trade Booker for like a 2025 conditional 7th. I don't give a shit. We'll try and figure. We'll draft depth, in like the 6th round, and then I try and rework. Add void years to Sterling, 2 void years to both Sterling Shepard and Logan Ryan's deals, and I do not touch Blake Martinez at all. Like I get that he's bouncing back from, he's gonna have to bounce back from like a knee injury that can end careers, but his value for what it is. I mean, like, what was the talk going into last off? It wasn't this offseason. It was last offseason where it was like, oh, you got Blake Martinez and you got what's the guy that plays for the Raiders? The middle linebacker that we just saw.
Littleton, Corey Littleton.
Yeah, Corey Littleton, and then like Nick Kwiatkowski and somebody else. And it was like, oh, the Giants paid Blake Martinez like $14-15 million a year or whatever it is. And he was the worst linebacker. He looks like the best fucking linebacker out of that whole group of free agent signings. So I'm hoping I'm going to give him the opportunity to come back as opposed to and perform again for the rest of his contract, as opposed to just going like, well, you're expendable. Because for me, the write-off here to replicate what he does is we don't get enough savings to be able to replicate that. I don't think anyway. I know a lot of people chalk him up to, he's a run stuffer. I
don't think I love Blake Martinez as a player. He's outstanding, and everything you said is absolutely true. I think out of those 4, I think it was like Joe Schubert and Kwiatkowski and Corey Littleton and Blake Martinez were like the top 4. Everyone kind of assumed Martinez would be the bottom one. But to me, some of that is, and again, this is, I think Blake Martinez, people were overblowing his bad year with the Packers or whatever. But
they weren't watching the tape.
I mean, as usual. But how much of that is Patrick Graham putting Blake Martinez in a situation to succeed? How do we know that had the Giants gotten, say, Corey Littleton, that we wouldn't be dealing with an even better player? I mean, I don't think that, but how much of Blake Martinez is Patrick Graham is, I guess, what I'm saying.
We can deal in speculation for, whether Corey Littleton or Nick Kwiatkowski could come in and do what he does. But what or at least be able to be close. But what I do see from Blake Martinez is for the price. I'm sorry, his average salary is $10 million, not 15. So he's a fucking steal for what that is. What he does is he's reliable against the run. He's a reliable tackler. He hits like a motherfucker. So if he's blitzing, and someone tries to block him, he generally blows that block up. Yeah. He's smart enough and quick enough to get in the passing lanes, even if he isn't touching the ball. He's making those passing lanes and those passing opportunities as tight as possible. He doesn't need to be a blanket coverage linebacker. You don't have many of those. You got maybe 3 of those in the NFL at any given time. So he's not going to be that. But he's, for a guy that's chalked up to be what Reggie Ragland actually is, he does a hell of a lot more than Reggie Ragland does. So for the money that you're going to save anyway next year, if you cut him, you're going to get Reggie Ragland. You're actually going to get a Reggie Ragland. You're actually going to, and that's not the crap on Reggie Ragland. Right? No offense.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
You're going to end up with a run stuffer because $10 million a year for Blake Martinez for what he does, that's a steal, my opinion anyway. You're not going to get that with the $7.5-8 million in $8.5 million in savings if he gets cut.
Yep.
It's just no.
Fair enough. Defensive line, I'm pretty okay here. Something needs to be added here. Obviously, you mentioned Austin Johnson. I think he's playing above his role right now. Like when they signed Austin Johnson and Danny Shelton, I expected, like first and second down, Danny Shelton, maybe Austin Johnson on third down. And now it's like Danny Shelton, if I could kick him off the team, I might. But I don't have that authority. Austin Johnson's kind of stepped up way more than I expected. But still, he ain't no great shakes either. But between Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, I'm pretty happy. And I know Dexter Lawrence isn't very flashy, but I think a lot of what allows Leonard Williams and the linebackers to come up and make plays, like Tay Crowder coming into running lanes and stuff like that, a lot of that has to do with what Dexter Lawrence does in dealing with trash on the offensive line and just kind of, mucking things up, in addition to making the splash plays that he does make from time to time. I like those two together, Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, and I think that there has been a slight drop-off in play on the defensive line because of Dalvin Tomlinson not being here as well. I think the 3 of them together was magic. And as much as I do like Raymond Johnson, I'm not going to elevate him to the Dalvin Tomlinson second-round pick level of play. I think that they could use, and I know Giants fans don't want to hear this, they could use some draft capital being dumped into the defensive line.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the Giants should put some mid-round, at most draft capital into the defensive line. Graham's defenses work best when you can rotate, when you have several guys to pick from who can rotate in and eat up 2 gaps at any given point. Mm-hmm. That's why it works when we have 1 defensive lineman, and 5 linebackers and the rest are corners. That's why that works, is because when that happens, we don't have Danny Shelton on the field. We've got Leonard Williams on the field. We've got Dexter Lawrence on the field. Austin Johnson every now and then is the one defensive lineman in those 1 DL sets. So I say Austin Johnson doesn't do it for me because, again, I'm jaded and I miss Dalvin Tomlinson. But, extending him, I think, would probably cost too much money. I think he's playing well enough to where he might be able to make a bit more money elsewhere, and he's probably going to try to. So I would try and find somebody to at least replicate what Johnson does, which is just, hey, I can eat up 2 gaps on any given play, or a gap and a half. Sorry, that's what the scheme actually is gap and a half. And just get Danny Shelton the fuck out of town just as soon as possible. I would, my Lord, just get rid of him and hang up his picture as a warning to everybody else. Like, don't come here with this shit. Like, if we sign you and you're supposed to be a run stuffer, don't become a liability on the defensive line. Danny Shelton's a liability.
Yeah, and I was shocked to see the way he just gets moved. I mean, it's like from the first week, I was like, man, I mean, the whole team played bad, but by like week 3, it's still happening. Week 4, it's still happening. It's like he's just not good, man.
Part of it is he doesn't get his hands in there and use his full extension. They just
he just puts his body into it. He thinks it. Well, I don't know what he's thinking, but it appears like he's thinking that he's just weighs enough that he can just throw his weight into somebody. Like, dude, these guys are the elite level of what they do. I mean, you got to try.
He doesn't beat anybody with length, and it's like when you see him really get fucked up, it's because his hands got there like a full half second after the other guys, and at that point your weight don't matter. Mm-hmm. You know, it's I'm going where you tell me to, sir. You know, it's
yeah. Now on the specialist side, just to make the quick wrap up here. There's no long snapper signed to 2022, so that's an expenditure that needs to happen, but is not an expensive one. Riley Dixon counts for only $3.5 million against the cap with almost no dead hit whatsoever. It's like $100K. But that is, that's like the 4th highest punter salary in the league. So you are fully on board with letting Dixon go or just cutting him and replacing him with just some other mid-tier punter. Yeah,
I would get him the fuck out of town and bring back Ryan Santoso. He can he punts and kicks. Riley Dixon, the first year his extension, he met the expectations.
I would agree with that.
He has not since. So it's one of those things where it's like you're not putting offenses within the 15 enough. You're not performing up to that. So why am I going to continue to overpay for you? With his savings, if you cut him, his savings is what, like 2.25. If you cut him next year,
it's almost the full salary. The dead hit is only $100K, so it's $3.4 million.
There you go. I think Spot Track has like 325, something like that. But for that, I can sign a new punter and I can get myself a replacement long snapper.
Yeah.
So, like, why the fuck should I keep you?
Yeah, actually,
I'd like to bring back Casey Kreider, but part of the reason why those two work well enough is because they're familiar with each other. So, fuck it, I'll just go get another duo.
To put it into perspective, Graham Gano only makes $1 million per year more than Riley Dixon, and that's a Pro Bowl kicker. So yeah, that's a guy who scores fucking points.
he's Gano la Gano, you ever hear that clip of the Spanish announcer from when Gano kicked that 63-yard field goal against us?
No, but I haven't, but I do love those international announcers with the big plays. I think that's so much fun.
You gotta, I'll send it to you. He loses his shit, and I have where he says I have had it since we've signed Gano. I've had a draft tweet saved with basically that. But instead of, the Panthers, it's Giants. I've had that saved for hopefully whenever Gano kicks a 63-yard field goal to win a game for us. I'm waiting for that day. Hey, I got the tweet ready, guys. But
I will be anxiously ready to retweet that, just re-scrolling my timeline. That's pretty much the 2022 roster outlook from a financial standpoint. Is there anything else you wanted to end off on? Or is there anything else you just want to talk about, your podcast or anything?
Well, so for me, the situation with the cap, right? It's what people got to remember is it's not just all right, how do we free up enough to get over the cap? You have to get savings on top of that because it's going to cost money it's going to cost, I think, somewhere around like $14 million to sign this draft class. That's because we got 2 first-round picks. So what ends up happening is, even before that, right? You got to get to 51. There's a top 51 rule for up until the season starts, where only your top 51 contracts, your biggest cap hits, dictate what your actual cap is at. So you got to be able to get to 51. We got, like you mentioned, 42. On the roster next year. Nate Solder's going to go, so that's how we get to 42 instead of 43. But then you got to assume every person after that is going to cost the team about, on average, $950,000 to get to 51. So you got to – that assumes that the Giants are signing primarily guys with 3 years or less experience. That's a minimum of 8 signings by itself just to get there. So that's $7.6 million that the Giants also have to account for on top of getting back over the cap. And you get the rookie pool. On its face, it looks like it's something like, I got my note here, $12.3 million. But because of the way the top 51 rule works, pretty much anybody after the 4th round doesn't count for the cap. So really you need about 9.3. So you got 7.6, you got 9.3, and then you also got to make up for any bodies for guys that you cut. So really the Giants, if I were the GM, I'm the new GM, I'm replacing David Gettleman and Kevin Abrams, fucking shyster, and whatever his goon is that actually does the cap management reason we're here, is I'm actually looking for at least $16 million that I got to figure out for next year, not just to get back over the cap. You got to have, and then even more, really, for like to get through the season, for your elevations, for your, hey, someone got fucking injured and we got to sign someone off the street, your IRs, even the people that we have on IR that we don't end up with the injury settlement against. You got to have money for that. So really, 20 mil you got to figure out, and it's so much more dire than I think what people are giving it, at least how it looks right now, is so much more dire than I think people give it credit for. Yeah, we got room in 2023 and 2024. We got plenty of fucking room there. But just going into next year, whoever this new GM is going to have plenty of excuse to gut the roster. And I'm hoping that they don't do that. One other thing I want to touch on is, like, what moves would I do really to get here? So for me, Solder goes, Kyle Rudolph goes, Riley Dixon goes, Devontae Booker goes. I talked about the 2 void contracts. That gets you to $26.9 million in total savings, right? Then you get $3.8 million to replace those guys and get to 51. Minimum to replace is $3.8 million, assuming $950K. Your functional savings is really $23 million at that point. Then it's the 16.9. But if you make those moves, you end up with about $6.2 million, which does get you into the year. So for me, that's what I'm looking for when the new GM comes in. Those are the moves that he can make. But then it's still dire because now we got to replace those fucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can blame Dave Gettleman all you want. But honestly, Dave doesn't do a whole lot by himself. Like, part of the reason the Giants are here and part of the reason that their drafts have sucked is too many people in the Giants organization have input on who to draft, what guys to go out and sign. For me, Kevin Abrams is the poster boy for that. He actually, let me see. He said on a podcast, Jordan Raynon's podcast earlier this year, that the truth is for the last 15 years, Matt Harris, Martin Mayhew, and now Ed Triggs are the guys who handle the cap. He might review some things, but he stays hands off with that shit. What he actually does is, let me sit in on coaching interviews. Pat Shurmur, he had input on hiring Pat Shurmur. You don't like Joe Judge now? He had input on signing him. Bringing in players. You thought that who's a linebacker a couple of years ago that we moved off really quickly from the Rams? Forget his fucking name now.
Alec Ogletree.
Alec Ogletree. I've repressed him. He had input on bringing him in. Coach wants this guy? All right, let me go do it. He said, Dave Gettleman says, I need someone to look at quarterbacks. He goes and looks at quarterbacks. You don't like Daniel Jones? Hey, here's your poster boy right here, right next to Dave Gettleman. So, I'm hoping that he goes, Ed Triggs goes, those guys go, and when this new GM comes in, they make those moves to get us through the year. And then that way we can start looking at, 2023, 2024, those kinds of things. And we can look at paying Saquon, because I think you've got no choice but to pay the guy now. He's too marketable. I think ownership's going to step in and say, listen, sign him long term. 2023, if you got to extend Martinez, if he's playing really well, shit, give him an extra year. Dex, if they don't exercise the 5th-year option, you got to pay him eventually. You got to get through this next year to set yourself up for those years, but also not try to lose. And it feels a lot like 2018 going into there, where it's like, fuck, we might have to gut the roster, but we don't want to lose at the same time. But the trajectory is different too. We got a lot more younger talent on this team than we did going into 2018. You know what I mean? We don't have nearly as many bloated contracts, or at least to the extent that they were bloated as we did in 2018. So it's as opposed to on a decline, it's more of a plateau for where we are going into next year.
Yeah.
But it still has echoes of it, and maybe I'm an alarmist, but it really does feel way more dire than it is. Those are the only moves I can see that without fucking gutting the team, that I can see you do that. If you cut, and last thing before I guess we close out, keep in mind, if you cut Nate Solder, you cut James Bradbury, you cut Blake Martinez, Sterling Shepard, Logan Ryan, Kyle Rudolph, Riley Dixon, Nick Gates retires or he gets cut, fuck it, we'll cut our losses. Devontae Booker, you let him go. That's $41 million you just picked up. But you have to gut this roster to just get $41 million. That's enough to sign 3 starters. You've cut 8 guys to maybe replace them with 3 starters and start from fucking scratch again. So, some of you are like, fuck it, blow it up, let's start again. I don't want to do that, because then we just end up in this position in 3 more years. But we got to figure something out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my thing too. That's what makes this such a gymnastics lesson, because if we were truly as shitty as our record indicates, and therefore truly in the situation that we are in, it would be more of a blow up, right? Like if we really were, if we had, Blake Martinez signed and he was playing and he just wasn't playing up to his contract, and James, we had all these expensive contracts and we were just fucking just terrible at everything, then whatever, blow it up. But I mean, we're not even seeing half the team play. Andrew Thomas hasn't been, and Kenny Galladay's barely played. We have so many other issues that. And like I said, for being $10 million over the cap, having 42 guys signed to 2022 is not that bad, because there is so much youth on this team. Like you said, they're a lot younger, they're a lot cheaper overall. So there's a couple bloated contracts, but they're not peppered in with an Eli Manning-sized contract on top of it, or stuff like that. So they are a little bit more flexible, but to reset again, yeah, it'll probably work, but it'll push us back about 3-4 years, and we're going to end up somewhere around the same spot again. So it does take a lot of gymnastics, and that's why I wanted somebody with a lot more brain power than me to come on and just kind of give some opinions that weren't my own shit ones. So is there anything else you want to plug besides your podcast before we're done here?
Not really. Just, hey, listen, Just a Giants Fan podcast. I'm available on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, of course. That's where it goes up first, and whatever Google is doing these days. It's available all there, all free. Listen to me, Hey, episodes, I try to go up every week. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I've had too many hits of scotch after watching, Giants versus Cowboys. And I'm out. I'm in a coma for a week. But when I do put episodes up, that's where you're gonna find it. Follow me on Twitter at JAGFPodcast. Just kiss your mother, be nice to your family, go to church. I don't know what else to say.
No, that's
I
perfect.
really appreciate you having me as a guest. This is you and I share a lot of opinions, but I feel like we have good conversation, be it tweet or, over Skype. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. I'm happy to have you on. If you guys aren't podcast people, but you are Twitter people, I highly recommend you follow him. His @ is right there on the screen. Really, really smart dude. You're on Twitter almost as much as I am, maybe even more, involved in everything. Very weighted opinions, very smart, very intelligent conversations. Nothing that makes you want to slam your head through a wall. So I highly recommend that you guys follow Victor. That's going to do it for this. So there's going to be a follow-up episode after this with me and the Cranky Fan, where we kind of look at the roster in 2022 in a little bit of a different light, and we're going to be accounting for a lot of the things that Victor said on this episode, so stay tuned for that. Whatever. This show is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, and of course it's now available on YouTube as well. So we will see you guys in the near future. Enjoy your bye week. Don't share your plans with the media. Go Giants.